Hi there, all of you. Thank you very much for joining us. I'll just wait for another 15, 20 seconds for as many of you to join and take a look at the chat box. Okay, so if you could just put down your name and where you're joining from, and later if you want to say what specifically you might want me to ask Danah and for her to answer in terms of the holistic concept of quantum leadership, quantum management, quantum spiritual management, spiritual intelligence, and so on, where she's one of the authorities and she has written the seminal books on many of these aspects. I'll introduce her briefly to you. Okay, we have about 60 odd people. Let me introduce Dr. Professor Danah Zohar to you. From what I know, briefly in contact with her, as well as from her books, as well as her website. Yamini will post you her website references. One of the things I just wanted to ask you is, while researching your stuff, I found there was a Springer site in which there was an open access book. Would that be all right to put that out? Do you mind?
Do, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please do.
So Yamini, can you please put out that?
My most recently published book.
Yeah.
And the most thorough one on quantum management.
Absolutely. That's truly mind-blowing. That's the one I'm referring to. So Yamini, if you could also post the zero distance quantum management, that Springer link as well. From what I read about Danah, and she can cover that in great detail, she was raised in the United States in a Methodist family. And she says she used to be a regular churchgoer till about 13 when she lost faith in religion as such, not necessarily just Christianity, but overall in religion, which is pretty true for me as well. I have no belief in any organized religion. And she liked physics, and she read David Bohm at the age of 15. David Bohm, for those of you who may not be familiar with him, is a contemporary of Einstein. He was one of the most outstanding quantum physicists. And his conversation with J. Krishnamurti on spirituality in about 12 volumes are truly worth listening to. And then she joined MIT on a scholarship, one of the few women amongst thousands of men. And she did her physics. And after that, during the course of doing physics, she developed a liking for philosophy. And she can explain why and what. And after MIT, after finishing her bachelor's program, undergrad program, she went to Harvard, did her PhD. And from what I can make out at the age of about 23 or something, she was already 22 or 23. She was already a doctorate holder. Oh, is it not correct? Okay, I'm sorry. So you can correct me. So I
decided to write my books instead of my doctoral thesis on the advice of a top British philosopher. So while I did several years doctoral study at Harvard, I did not get my PhD.
Oh, okay. So we are wrong in putting your name as Dr. Zohar.
Yes, I am a professor, but I am not a doctor.
Okay. I'm terribly sorry. It is our mistake. Okay, we correct that now. She's Professor Zohar. And so I'll let Danah speak to you about what she did. And before I come into some of the issues of some of the topics that we want to cover today in terms of spiritual intelligence and how it relates to the quantum theory and how it relates to corporate management, leadership, and so on, and the kind of work that she is doing with some of the very, very famous global firms, such as Haier in China, which now owns the General Electric Appliances division worldwide, and Roche in India, and a few others. And we will take you through some of those. So, Danah, over to you. And if you would like to start with a little bit about correcting some of the stuff that I've told about you, what is the beginning of your interest in spirituality and what led you into the integration of this quantum and spiritual philosophies?
Most everything that you said, Raman, was correct, except that the philosophical interest in quantum physics was there from the beginning when I discovered it at age 15. Because at that age, all young people are beginning to ask the big questions of life. Where do I come from, and why am I here, and what is my life about? What should I do? This is something that the traditional religions used to help people with. But because I had lost my faith largely in the approach of the organized religions, I was looking for answers elsewhere. And in Bohm's presentation of quantum physics, even as a teenager, I found there were quantum answers to these big questions. So it helped me get through those years of teenage angst and uncertainty. And without realizing it at the time, I began to become a quantum thinker because my worldview had been shaped by Bohm's physics and then other things I read about quantum physics. When I got to MIT, as you say, I planned to study physics. That was my scholarship. But MIT made its undergraduates at that time take 2 years of general humanities courses. It was largely philosophy. And I discovered that the philosophical discipline helped me to ask more clearly those questions I had asked as a teenager. So I switched my degree at MIT to a double degree in physics and philosophy. And my prime interest became the philosophy that can be derived from quantum physics rather than wanting to be a research quantum physicist.
Okay. In your book, recent book, Zero Distance, there's a part where you cover about the experience of using those concepts of quantum and so on in Roche in India. And this will appeal to many of the people here. A good number would be from India as well. And you say that at one point in time, somebody turned out in absolute frustration and said to the CEO, quantum, that's all I hear. What the hell does it mean? So would you like to explain what the hell it means?
Yes, with the caveat that I would say to any CEOs, managing directors, or HR directors who may be listening, that if you want to introduce quantum management into your company, don't burden your employees too much with too much quantum physics, because they don't need it to do their jobs in a quantum way. All they need is what I'm going to say now. Quantum physics gave an entirely different interpretation from the Newtonian mechanistic physics of the nature of the physical universe and of our relationship to it. Newton's physics had nothing to say about the human world, human consciousness, human aspirations, human life in any way. It was simply about the material world. And by contrast, quantum physics doesn't separate the subject from the object, me from the world I interact with. So that in quantum physics tells us that I, as an observer, I, as someone who makes decisions about how to set up my experiment, I, as I take actions, co-creatively engage with the potentiality of the quantum realm and am an active co-creator of the world we experience as our daily reality. So quantum physics puts us very much in the picture of what this universe has become that we see, and it tells us that we are very much a part of the cosmos, of nature, of the things that the Western tradition had always insisted we are separate from. And it also, the philosophical implications of quantum physics tell us that to understand quantum physics, the way quantum physics works, you've got to think in a very different way. Western people think either or. It's this or it's that. Quantum physics demands that we think that it is both and. It is this and it is also that. It can be true and it can also be false. It can be black and it can be white. And it does this with its wave-particle duality. The Newtonians were struggling with the question, is light a wave or is light a particle? And quantum physics said, this is the wrong question because it isn't one or the other, it's both. And you will only get one or the other once you set up an experiment and measure it, and thus interfere with the potentiality. And that's where the human act of observation or experimentation comes in. Since then, we understand that it isn't, as some quantum theorists suggested a few years ago, only consciousness that materializes quantum potentiality. The universe is made of energy, quantum physics tells us. The Schrödinger wave function that describes the quantum realm is a spread of potential energies. And things in our daily world all have a kind of energy. You and I even are made of energy. And when the quantum potentiality meets daily reality, the energy matchup means that one particular thing will be chosen out of all the possibilities to materialize. So the important thing about this for management, the lesson to be learned, is that there's always a creative interaction between us and the potentialities in a situation. Always an interaction between a company and its environment, its professional relationships, the nature of the society in which it's operating, geopolitical conditions, unexpected events like COVID, which struck business worldwide very hard. Whereas the old way of management thinking had been that companies can be islands unto themselves. They only have to think about their products, their customers, their shareholders, and they don't have to look out the window. Quantum physics teaches managers, no, what's out the window is as important as what's going on inside the window. And that's a very important lesson for management. Quantum physics also teaches us that it is the relationship that creates reality, new reality. When two things come together, something new emerges from the relationship. The lesson for that of management is that our relationships really matter. Our internal relationships within the company, how the employees of a company are relating to each other, working together, how management is relating to the employees, and how the company itself is relating to competitors or other companies, to the marketplace, to the political environment of the society, etc. Very important lesson and different from what management traditionally taught. Quantum physics also teaches us that the world is not controllable and predictable and law-abiding in a predictable way, as the old physics had taught and traditional management, which was rooted in the old physics, believed. Quantum physics tells us we live in an uncertain, indeterminate world where anything can happen unexpectedly at any moment. So traditional management, with its Newtonian heritage, depended on 5-year plans, well thought out strategies. It had a structure, bureaucratic structure, that was very difficult to move and change. In a traditional company, it takes 6 months to get a decision, because somebody working with a customer who says the customer needs something different has got to pass it to his manager, who has to pass it to his supervisor, who has to pass it to the regional supervisor, and so on. And by the time it gets back to the man who needs to act, 6 months have passed. Companies today cannot afford that kind of slowness. We live in times of rapid change, radical uncertainty, and global interconnectedness. Companies today must be adaptive, flexible, easy to change, quick to change. And we've got to get those response times between what's going on at the level of customer needs and customer preferences and how a company can respond. I'll give you a good instance of this with Roche India, which did do a quantum management transformation. Roche salesmen were told, don't think of yourselves as salesmen, think of yourself as doctor's assistants. Don't go to a doctor and say, I have some drugs to sell you and some free samples to tempt you, but rather you go to the doctor and you say, how can I, with what Roche has available, help you give better care to your patients? And that already showed a sensitivity, a quantum sensitivity to the relationship to the doctor, and the doctor's concerns is what should matter to the salesman, not how many drugs can I sell to this doctor, but how to help the doctor with what Roche can offer. At one veterans hospital in one of India's provinces, there was a policy that the hospital budget could only buy drugs a week at a time. Well, Roche products were packaged in monthly packages. And therefore, some of the patients at this veterans hospital couldn't get the medication they needed as regularly as they should have it, because the hospital budget couldn't order a whole month at a time. And so the doctor, talking to the Roche salesman, said, can I please buy a week's supply at a time from you? Because then our patients can be treated at once. And some of these were patients whose lives depended on the drugs. Because of the Roche quantum management system, which had cleared all the bureaucracy out of the system, and made it possible for that frontline salesman to go directly to the managing director in Mumbai with one phone call and say to her what the hospital wanted and say, can I break the package up and give this hospital a week's supply at a time? The managing director had been given the power from Roche Global to make such decisions without having to go to the regional director and up the chain of bureaucracy. So she said, yes. Within 24 hours, that hospital had the weekly strips of the medication that it needed, and lives were saved in the course of this. Now, that was a lesson from quantum physics, that you've got to respond instantly, very quickly, to changing demands in your marketplace, in your customer base, or into something like an unexpected pandemic like COVID. The quantum companies like Hire and its subsidiaries and other quantum companies in China that had adopted quantum management thrived during the COVID crisis. They grew. They got more profit. While most traditional companies, as you know, suffered very badly and many went out of business because they couldn't respond quickly enough to the demands of the pandemic. So the lesson for managers about quantum science is they should know what I've put are the kind of 8 defining principles of quantum systems, that they are uncertain, that they are both and, you think not in opposition, but in all possibilities at once, that there are many possibilities and all should be explored, not just one at a time. You learn these 8 points for yourself, and you tell them very simply to your staff that you're training. You don't bother their poor minds with having to think they have to become quantum physicists. What you want to make sure is that your employees understand how those 8 principles of quantum thinking affect their jobs, what they have to go out into the field and do, what they have to do with customers. And that was the mistake that the managing director of Roche made in her training. She lent a little bit too heavily on herself being really excited by quantum physics and all it says, and she told her people too much about it. And so that poor salesman who had a problem, how do I handle this situation? And she said to him that day, I was present, oh, just be quantum. And the poor man tore his hair and said, quantum, quantum, I don't know what is this quantum. She should have explained to him that quantum in his situation meant that you go directly to the chief doctor of the hospital. You don't go through the chain of bureaucrats that were in the way. So this is an important lesson for companies who think quantum management is a very good idea. The way you train your staff is critical. Most employees are not going to understand quantum physics. They need to understand why there's a new way of doing things in this company and how they should do it differently.
Thank you, Danah. I think it's a brilliant primer of these 8 principles that you enunciated. To just recap some of them over and above what you said, it's also about the fact that we are all co-creators in the process. We are co-creators with the universe, and we want to change whatever is happening. We have to take the first step. It's all about relationships, and the world is uncertain. Nothing is going to remain the same, and therefore, if anything needs to be done, we have to be proactive in doing that. Now, you said there were 8 principles about quantum. Equally, you have also laid down 12 principles of spiritual quotient. Many of them, as I remember just out of the top of my head, self-awareness, for example, reframing, asking questions, why, again and again, compassion, humility, and so on and so forth. These are also very, very fundamental to coaching. And one of the struggles that we are finding is even when we announce this about spirituality in coaching, that we wanted to have this International Coaching Week, many people turned around and asking, why spirituality in coaching? Why does it affect us? So in the context of the work that you have done, that is not just about coaching, but it's about any intervention in management, in changing the world, the community, and everything. That spiritual quotient and spiritual intelligence is important. I would like to
You've
hear.
raised 2 different points there, both of which are important, and I want to address them separately. Those 12 principles, again, are rooted in quantum science, this time in complexity science, which talks about living quantum systems. All of organic life, from the smallest bacterium to our cells, are described by complexity science as complex adaptive systems. These are living systems that use the same principles that define quantum physics, but in a way that is appropriate to the needs of organic life. They have 12 qualities, defining qualities. And those 12 principles are each derived from one of the qualities of what makes every organic system successful as a living system, a complex adaptive system. Complexity scientists themselves, other than I, and I strongly argue that companies, societies, any human institution will work more effectively if it works in a way that allows it to be a complex adaptive system, a living quantum system. After all, we live in a quantum world. Physicists now tell us everything is quantum. It's just that at our level of reality, we don't notice it so much, whereas in the atomic world, it's very noticeable. Quantum physics has told us we are fully part of this world. Our bodies are made of stardust and follow the same physical laws as any material things. We now know that our minds have some kind of quantum field in them. It's not sure yet how it's generated, so that much of our thinking is quantum-like. Therefore, the organizations and institutions that we found should also be quantum-like, so that everything is in accordance with the cosmos and nature. This is the big lesson that quantum physics gives us, which the Indians have always known, the Chinese have always known. These Asian societies have always felt that we humans are part of the universe and nature, and that the way we live our lives should reflect that. So that's about these 12 principles. They are based on science. Now, what you said about spirituality in business, I can answer very easily, because a man visited me just yesterday here at my house and asked me exactly this. What does spirituality in business mean? When I did the foundational work on spiritual intelligence, I defined it as our access to higher meaning, values, and purpose, and our ability to use these higher meanings, values, and sense of purpose in the way we conduct our lives, run our companies, make our decisions. Again, the meaning, values, and purpose are given to us in quantum philosophy. So there's a direct link again back to the nature of the quantum world and what quantum physics is telling us. The meaning of human life is that our interventions help to make the world. We are partially makers of the world. We make the world, therefore we are responsible for the world. We're not just hapless victims of a reality. Very important change in attitude. I'm responsible for this world. I'm responsible for me. Don't blame anything else. And the purpose of our lives, because quantum physics tells us that good relationships make good reality, bad relationships make bad reality. We are the makers of the world. We make relationships all the time in our personal lives, with our friends, with our families, with our community. Relationships are being made all the time by the companies we form or the organizations of any kind that we form. So the purpose of our lives is to make good, beneficial relationships. So we have the meaning of our lives. We are necessary co-creators of reality. We have the purpose of our lives. It is to make good relationships as we make this reality. And this is the spiritual basis of our lives, according to spiritual intelligence. It's not to do with your ability to follow the codes of an organized religion. Too many of us know people who do that, who are not actually very good people. They follow all the rules of the religion and they do bad things. If you follow these two simple senses of the meaning of your life and the purpose of your life, you're going to be a good person. And a company you found on those principles is going to be a good company. So spirituality in business simply means building a company that brings good into the world, building a company that makes the world a better place and people's lives a bit better. The people who are your customers, the people who in the community who are affected by you, and above all, the people who are your employees. Too many companies treat their employees like they're just tools of the system to be used for the company to make money. Companies exist to make money, yes, but the people who help those companies make money, the actual employees, are human beings with needs, with lives, and with potential. And that old way of managing its people that traditional management has, of making them afraid so they follow the rules, so the company is full of fear, telling them don't think, just do what you're told, and paying them as little as you can, that's not quantum. It's not spiritual. So spirituality in business doesn't mean you have to all be saying prayers during the day. It doesn't mean you build a shrine to Shiva in the hallway of your office building or your factory. It means that your company's purpose is to do good, to bring good value to your customers, to bring decent working lives to your employees, and to make the world a little bit of a better place. Companies, too, are huge makers of reality. On a gigantic scale, companies make the world we live in. Selfish capitalism and bad management have made our world a hellish, unequal, and unfair place for many people. The workers inside the companies, the customers who are taken as mugs and cheated, squeezed for everything the company can get out of them, and the societies that don't benefit because these companies don't pay their taxes and so on. Imagine quantum companies who treat their employees well, who give their workers the chance to develop their best potential and give that to the company, who treat their employees as partners in the company, as people to be considered, people who can ask questions, people who can make suggestions, people who are not afraid to work, but like the employees of Roche India, can't wait to get to work in the morning because work is such a happy and exciting place, and their job's very meaningful to them. That's spirituality in the workplace.
Thanks, Danah. It's absolutely brilliant. In fact, yesterday, you might possibly know him or know of him. Dr. Marshall Goldsmith was with us. He's considered to be one of the leading coaches in the world, executive coaches, trained with Peter Drucker and people like that. And one of the things that he left at the end was, whatever you do, how uncomfortable it makes you feel, make another person comfortable and make the world a better place. And you are saying exactly the same thing. And he's a practicing Buddhist, and you are speaking about it from scientific point of view, and it's absolutely amazingly brilliant. I have two questions from one of our senior coaches and one of our directors. He says, being a quantum physicist and philosopher, what's your take on non-duality based on the double slit experiment?
Well, I touched on that when I was talking about the defining principles of quantum physics. Duality is based on the notion that mind is one thing, matter is another thing. Humans are one thing, the material world, nature are other things. This is the dominant Western view. Non-duality is where we are part of the whole thing, where the scientist who does the experiment sets up the two-slit experiment, and the result he gets, light is wave-like or particle-like, they are not separate. The scientist setting up the experiment and the quantum potentiality coming up to the two or one slits are partners in a co-creative act. So quantum physics is totally non-dual. There is no distinction between the observer and the observed, between the subject and the object, between our human consciousness and the decisions and actions it makes us take, and the shaping of the material world. This non-duality has always been present in Chinese and Indian philosophy. It's the dominant view of Asia, and it's one of the main things that has separated the Asian way of looking at life, the worldview of Asia, from the Western worldview. Well, the physics shows us it's the West that has got it wrong. We do not live in a dualistic world. And continuing with this misunderstanding, this dangerous illusion, is one of the things now disturbing Western societies and making the Western way of doing business be in trouble. Dualism is a curse of the Western tradition.
Thank you. The second question by the same gentleman is, why do people separate science and spirituality? People say that science has evidence, but there is no evidence for spirituality.
Again, he is right about the old science. Newtonian science is totally unspiritual. Indeed, it denies almost anything spirituality is about. There is no meaning to human life, according to Newton's physics, because we don't figure in it at all. There is no purpose to our lives. we're not part of things. That's why religion was such a comfort to people in the West, because religion told them that God gave them a purpose, God gave them a meaning. But Newton's physics showed that much of these Western religious beliefs were really quite nonsensical. It requires quite a leap of faith and, in my opinion, sanity even, to believe some of the things that the Western organized religions teach. And so people drifted away from religion, but in the course of that, drifted away from the roots of any spiritual meaning to their lives. The new physics, quantum physics, as I've been explaining, is inseparable from spirituality, because it does tell us very clearly that our lives have a meaning, our lives have a purpose, our actions do make a difference. It does matter whether we're a good person or a bad person, whether we make a good company or a bad company. So it comes in to fill this vacuum left by the split between the old science and spirituality. With the new science, there is no such split. I would also point out to the coaches who are listening, and I suppose most of your listeners are coaches, that the 12 principles of spiritual intelligence, which are also the same principles of quantum leadership, are an excellent framework for coaching. Because if you follow those 12 principles, you're turning your life, your way of acting, the way you relate and everything, into a quantum life. Because you're turning you're making your life and your behavior in accordance with your own physical makeup. You're becoming a complex adaptive system, in the technical term. So Roche used these 12 principles as the backbone of its training program. To become a quantum employee of a quantum company, these 12 principles. And I designed an SQ self-assessment test that lets people rate themselves on these principles. And then they could discuss why they were weak on this one and what they could do about it and so on. And so Roche used that as an HR tool to coach and train people. And many coaches now use this test of mine, for the same purpose, because it can give a structure to a coaching program. You work on a person's self-awareness, a big problem for most people who come to coaches. People aren't very self-aware, particularly today. There's so much demand on our attention from the outside, so much bombardment of data on our brains. We pay very little attention to inside. And yet what's inside affects what's outside. So this structure would cause the coach to zero in on helping the coaching client develop his self-awareness. The same with spontaneity. Most people are habit-bound and go about things the way they did things in the past, the way their habits tell them. It's easier to follow a habit than to do something differently. And that messes up a lot of our lives because we've got bad habits, lazy habits, and the habits trap us. So again, the effect of these bad habits is one of the reasons people come to coaches. If the coach is working on the principle of spontaneity, adaptability, he's helping the client learn to break out of this cycle of just following his easy habits and to think more freshly about each new situation with which he has to deal. which is also related to the principle of reframing. Reframing means to now look at things from a very different perspective. Challenge the assumptions you've had about things, because most of our thinking is based on assumptions we make, but our assumptions are often wrong, or they're based on the past. Reframing principle says to the client, constantly check your assumptions. If it's a couple's problem, the man may be assuming his wife is being unfaithful to him. The coach would get him to check that assumption, to look carefully. Why do you think that? Is there really evidence for that? Or is it something to do with your own personality that makes you a suspicious person? Coming back to self-awareness. If you're a business leader, your assumptions are making you think that your customer wants a particular kind of product, or that tomorrow will be like today, and thus your strategic plan is effective tomorrow that you planned yesterday. And the reframing principle says to this business leader, every time you've got to make a decision, look at the assumptions you're tempted to build into that decision. You follow? So these 12 principles all help to make you more quantum in your decision making, in your life, in your relationships, in your relationship to yourself. And that's what coaching is all about, I believe.
You're absolutely right. It's not only about coaching. There are a number of questions. How will you do it? If they have listened to you carefully, they would know how to do it. Like you said in Roche, the people wouldn't have talked about just quantum, but try to explain to them the relevance to what actually they have to do on the field. And that particular experiment, the experience that you talked about giving a hospital in a rural area 1 week supplies, as you mentioned there, saved lives of many, many, many cancer patients. So the company made a difference. It depends on how much commitment you have. I just want to move to, when we started, you sort of asked me, 1 hour, that long. It's
It's
15
gone very
minutes
quickly,
already.
hasn't it?
It's already 15 minutes, Danah, and we can sit here listening to you for another hour, but we'll let you go after about 10 minutes. But the question that I have is really the most important question from a perspective of people who are here, leaders and coaches in performance. You speak in Zero Distance and other books about the movement from Newtonian, Freudian, Taylorist kind of movements to quantum science in terms of how businesses should work. And one of the most famous examples that you have is here, Mr. Chang Ryumin and his Redan Hei, how it is pronounced in
Rendan
Chinese.
Hoya. It's very
Hoya.
difficult to pronounce. Rendan Hoya.
Yeah. The brilliant principle of saying that the value of the employers must 100% be congruent with the value of the customers, the users, and how do you reach them. That is what is a zero distance, and that's what is quantum. And just if you could explain a little bit more about, because it's such a complex subject, it's seemingly very easy, but very, very difficult. I've been going through your book for the last about 1 month, and still I'm rereading the pages to understand more about it. So in the balanced time, if you could just explain a little bit about the kind of work that you have done with them and how it has helped.
Yes. Well, Hire was the first company in the world to put into practice my quantum management theory. Zhang Min told me, much to my surprise, he'd been reading my books for years before he invited me to China, and reading my books on the quantum self and quantum psychology and quantum management played a large role, he said, in the way he designed this Rendan Hoya management model. And for the sake of future, the English way of referring to the Rendan Hoya model is zero distance, which I'm going to explain. So we can just call it Hire zero distance model, and never mind this unpronounceable Chinese word. like so many Chinese words, which I find unpronounceable. Quantum physics tells us everything is entangled with everything. Everything is connected to everything. There's no such thing as separation. David Bohm said separation is an illusion. I think you get this in Hindu philosophy, and you certainly get it in Taoist philosophy in China, that everything is related to everything. Now, in a traditional company, inspired by the atomism of Newtonian physics, because that's where Taylor looked for his inspiration, everything is separate from everything. Management is separate from employees. Employees are separated from each other into functional silos. You work in marketing, or you work in R&D, or you work in HR, and you don't know what the rest of the company is doing. And the company and its employees are separated from customers. Anybody today dealing with a traditional company, trying to phone them up and get some customer service, knows the distance they put between you now is one of these damned answering machines that gives you automated answers to the questions you don't want to ask, and you can't get through to a human being. Maximum distance between the company and the customer. Higher zero distance model, following the quantum model, is there shouldn't be any distance between any of these things. Management and employees are all part of the same system, and they should be interlinked and working together. Employees in a company should not be separated from each other, because everything they're doing depends on what the others are doing. They must understand the whole system. This is the quantum principle of holism, that everything is connected to everything. So he divided the company up into self-organizing, multifunctional teams, so that each team has somebody who is an expert in a thing, but they're all now together, working together in one team. And these teams, which he calls micro enterprises, because they are tiny startup companies in their own right now, free to make decisions, relate directly to their customers, both electronically through email and AI and so on, and even in person. The higher salesman will go to a customer's funeral or a wedding, or send a birthday card to his children. He knows his customer better than himself, which is the higher rule. Know your customer better than you know yourself. So throughout the higher system, there's zero distance between every element of the system. Also, higher says, look, our ecosystem isn't just internal, but as quantum physics tells us, the way we do business, the way we relate to our customers, depends on all the other companies out there. So higher puts zero distance between itself and even competitors. It forms cooperative short-term contracts with them. When they can supply a package product to their customers, where another company may supply part of that package, and then they share the profit with that other company. So the entire higher system is an ecosystem built on the principle of zero distance. And that makes, again, business much more aware of the people who are its customers. It makes the people much more aware of each other. It makes everybody function more effectively and more productively. And it indeed helps to make the world a better place.
This concept is very much, like you said, quantum. It was derived from his reading your books on quantum. It is spiritual. And in China, like you said, the Eastern approach may have accepted it more easily. But then they took it to the United States, bid for GE, took it over, and turned it around and multiplied its performance many, 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 many times. How did they manage to do it in an environment which wasn't totally open to this at all?
Well, they had to change the CEO of GE Electronics to achieve it, because when Haier acquired GE Electronics, I met the CEO at the time of GE Electronics. He was a very Newtonian fellow, and you could tell he just didn't get it. Haier has a principle when it acquires a foreign subsidiary of non-interference. It likes to let the subsidiary function in its own way because it knows its culture better than somebody in Qingdao in China knows the culture. So they wanted American executives to run GE appliances. They found a man also who had been an executive in the old GE appliances when General Electric, the parent company, owned it, who was more open to new ways of thinking. He was invited to China for 6 months just to see how Haier operates, get familiar with the zero distance system, the self-organizing principle used by Haier that makes all employees entrepreneurs in their own right. And then he was allowed to go back to Louisville in Kentucky, where the headquarters are, and do it his way, adhering to the guiding principles of the zero distance model followed by Haier, but doing it in a way that is conducive to American cultural habits and standards and values. So GE's zero distance model is like the Haier model in many, many ways, has all of its good features, self-organizing teams, zero distance within the company, light touch leadership from the CEO, closeness to the customers, but its actual structure is in some ways different from the structure of Haier. And Haier practices that quantum principle, celebrating diversity with all of its subsidiaries. So its European subsidiary is run by Europeans. It's just acquired a company in Vietnam that will be run by Vietnamese. I think it's now negotiating with some companies in India. They will be run by Indians. All of the leaders of these foreign subsidiaries will learn the zero distance model and adapt it in their way to their country's cultures. And again, this is this principle of spontaneity, adaptability. One size doesn't fit all. And Haier has the wisdom to know that.
And that too is a way of the universe. That's a way of the nature. That's a way of. Thank
We
you
don't
very, very
expect
much.
lions to behave like horses.
Yeah, which it takes me to the last point. I don't want a discussion on that. You mentioned somewhere that there's only 2% difference between us and the primates and the higher mammals, whereas there is actually a 4% difference between the
Genetically,
two
that's
genders.
all the difference there is.
That's
Yes.
all the difference is. So we are less different from the higher mammals and primates than man and woman are different. So what a kind of statement it is. In fact, irony of it in some ways.
It tells us what our challenge is, though, Ram.
Yeah.
Because though in many, many ways we behave just like chimpanzees in our daily lives and in our companies, there is a human difference. And with that 2% difference, think of the great things humanity has done. The great books, the great philosophies, the great poetry, the great literature, technology. We talk about growing our consciousness. This is a big movement across the world, growing consciousness. And that it's too vague what we mean by that. I give you a simple target. Let's grow our consciousness by 1 or 2% more. Let's just become 1 or 2% more human. And my God, what a difference it would make if that 2% has made the difference it has made. And it doesn't sound so impossible or so challenging to get just 1 or 2% a little bit more human. And how do you become more human? You follow the quantum spiritual path. You realize you help to make the world, and therefore you're responsible for the world, and you take that responsibility, and you know that your purpose in life is to make good relationships and bring good into the world, to be a good person. Following those 2 simple spiritual principles, we could make that leap into 2% more human consciousness. It's that easy and that difficult.
Totally, totally. I think it was Dr. David Hawkins some years ago who said that the consciousness, which was decreasing and has started improving about 50 years ago. And now there has to be a quantum improvement to that. Let's hope for that. We hope to have you again with us, another session. The 1 hour hasn't been enough. There are far too many questions unanswered here. But thank you very, very much for taking the time. I know that you've just come back from China and had some difficulty in getting through to the session as well. But we are tremendously grateful to you, Danah.
I've
Thank you
enjoyed
very, very much.
talking to you, Ram, and I only wish I were there in person to meet the people who are asking the questions, because personal engagement is always more dynamic and effective.
Zero distance. We will make that happen.
Zero distance.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for all of you who've been through this session and asked such lovely questions and being so actively participating. Thank you very much indeed. Good night from India. Good day from wherever you are. Thank you. Bye.